Take a close look at this picture. At first glance, it just looks like an old photograph, right? Dated 1894, a classic sepia tone that instantly tells you it's from another time. You see a family, a mother, a father, and what appears to be their baby. It's the kind of image you might find tucked away in an old shoebox in an attic, or perhaps come across in an antique shop, nestled between forgotten postcards and dusty trinkets. It seems quaint, a little window into a world long gone, a historical artifact that offers a glimpse of how people lived and dressed over a century ago. Nothing really jumps out at you, nothing screams for attention. It's just ordinary. But if you look a little longer, let your eyes wander over the details, a subtle unease might start to creep in. It's not loud, not obvious, more like a whisper, a faint ripple on a still surface. There's a quiet hum of something being not quite right, hidden just beneath the surface of that faded sepia. This particular photograph didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually resurfaced a few years back, found among a collection of forgotten items from an estate sale. Someone bought a box of old photos, probably hoping for a hidden gem or just a cheap piece of history. When they started going through them, this one stood out, not because it was beautiful or particularly striking, but because of that quiet, nagging feeling. The initial fascination was purely historical, a simple curiosity about the past. Who were these people? What were their lives like? It's natural to wonder, right? But then something caught the eye. It was small, almost imperceptible at first, a slight anomaly that made the viewer pause. It was a detail in the photo that didn't quite line up with everything else, a tiny crack in the otherwise smooth facade of a typical family portrait. That's when the first suspicions started to form, a tiny seed of doubt planted in the mind of the person holding the image. As you spend more time with the photograph, those small, off details become a little clearer. They're still not screaming at you, but they're definitely there, like an itch you can't quite scratch. Look at the mother. Her expression is rigid, not quite sad, not quite happy. It's almost like she's holding something back, or perhaps she's just incredibly uncomfortable. Her eyes seem to stare past the camera, distant, almost empty. And the father, his gaze is fixed, yes, but it feels unnaturally so. It's not the warm, proud look you'd expect from a parent in a family portrait. It's vacant, almost too still. The overall composition itself, when you really think about it, has a strange stiffness. It lacks the natural flow, the relaxed posture you'd see in a truly spontaneous moment. Everything feels a little artificial, carefully posed, almost forced. It's like everyone in the picture is playing a part, and they're not quite nailing it. Initially, your focus might naturally drift to the living family members, the parents, trying to understand their expressions, their story. But there's a persistent, lingering sense that something else is present in the picture, or perhaps should be present, that isn't quite right. It's the baby, positioned front and center, held by the mother. As you look at it, a growing feeling of dread starts to form, surrounding this central figure. It's not an immediate, jump scare kind of dread, but a slow creeping sensation. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something about the baby just doesn't make sense, even before you realize its true nature. The photograph, which once seemed so innocent, begins to reveal its latent, unsettling quality. It's like the image itself is holding a secret, and it's slowly, deliberately, letting that secret come to the forefront. The more you stare, the more the ordinary fades, replaced by a profound sense of unease, a quiet whisper that this family, this moment, this baby, is hiding something very dark. The innocent sepia tones now feel like a shroud, barely concealing a truth that is about to shatter your perception of this seemingly simple family portrait. The photograph, initially a curiosity, now demanded a deeper look. Someone, likely the person who found it, decided to put it under a magnifying glass, or perhaps even used early digital enhancement techniques to bring out the details. And that's when things started to get really disturbing. As the image became clearer, the specific details of the baby, held so carefully by the mother, began to jump out. The skin tone, for instance, wasn't quite right. It wasn't the rosy glow of a healthy infant, nor the pale, waxy look of a sick one. It had an unnatural, almost uniform pallor, like something made, not born. There was also a strange lack of natural infant movement. Babies, even when sleeping, have a subtle softness, a way their limbs rest, a slight give to their posture. This baby had none of that. Its pose was too perfect, too static, almost stiff. The way its little hands were positioned, the angle of its head, it all looked arranged, deliberately placed, rather than naturally held. It was peculiar, definitely, and the more you looked, the more that feeling of something being wrong grew stronger. Then came the moment of chilling understanding. It hit the viewer like a cold wave. The baby was not a living child. The shock of that realization must have been immense, an immediate horror that twisted the stomach. Everything that felt off suddenly clicked into place. The mother's rigid expression, the father's vacant stare, the artificial stiffness of the whole composition. It all made sense in the worst possible way. The baby wasn't simply sleeping or unwell. It was an object. Initial theories must have raced through their mind. Was it a doll, an incredibly lifelike toy, or something even stranger, something designed to mimic life in a way that felt deeply wrong? The idea of it being a taxidermied animal, while grotesque, also crossed some minds given the unusual texture that seemed to emerge under closer inspection. But whatever it was undeniably not alive. Now, before jumping to conclusions about the family's sanity, it's important to briefly touch on the historical context of post-mortem photography. In the 19th century, it wasn't uncommon for families to take photographs of their deceased loved ones, especially children. With high infant mortality rates, a post-mortem photograph might be the only image a family had of a child who died young. These photos were often tender, a way to remember and grieve. The deceased would be posed as if sleeping, sometimes with props, to create a peaceful, lasting memory. However, this particular photograph stood out from typical post-mortem portraits. In those photos, while the subject was deceased, they were still a person. You could see the subtle signs of death, the stillness, but there was still a human quality to them. This baby, however, appeared too lifelike, yet simultaneously, profoundly not alive. It wasn't a dead child, it was something else entirely. The unique horror here wasn't just death, but the deliberate portrayal of a non-living object as if it were a living being, presented in a formal family portrait. The psychological impact of this discovery is profound. It plunges you straight into what's known as the uncanny valley. This is that unsettling feeling, that revulsion and discomfort you get when something looks almost human but isn't quite. It's the difference between seeing a cartoon character and seeing a highly realistic robot that just misses the mark. The closer it gets to human perfection without actually being human, the more disturbing it becomes. This baby in the photograph perfectly embodies that effect. It's almost a child, almost breathing, almost real. But that tiny, crucial almost is what makes it so deeply unsettling. The immediate questions that arise are chilling. Why would anyone do this? How did they manage to create something so eerily convincing? And what kind of family, what kind of parents would participate in such a bizarre and disturbing charade? The photograph transforms from a simple historical curiosity, a window into a past era, into a source of profound unease, a disturbing psychological puzzle that begs for explanation. It becomes clear that this is not just an old picture, it's a photograph holding a dark, unspoken secret, a silent scream frozen in time. The sepia tones, once charming, now seem to shroud a carefully constructed illusion, hinting at a grief so deep and twisted that it manifested in this unsettling form. The quiet discomfort from before now turns into a full-blown sense of dread, as the true nature of the subject becomes undeniably clear. With the chilling realization that the baby was not real, the focus of the investigation naturally shifted. The immediate pressing need was to identify the family in the photograph. Who were these people who had chosen to present such a disturbing tableau to the world? Researchers pored over old census records, local historical society archives, and newspaper obituaries from the late 19th century. They cross-referenced names, tried to match facial features with other known portraits from the era, and even consulted genealogical databases. But the family remained stubbornly anonymous. The lack of identifying marks on the photograph itself, no studio name, no handwritten dedication on the back, only added to the mystery. This anonymity, rather than making the photograph less significant, actually made it more unsettling. The more these individuals remained faceless and nameless, the more their story took on a universal, almost mythical quality, making the bizarre act even more potent and terrifying. It was as if they existed solely within that single frozen moment, their lives before and after irrelevant to the macabre scene they had created. The search for answers then expanded, moving beyond just the family. Could there be local legends or folklore from the era that might shed some light on such a bizarre practice? The late 1800s were a time ripe with spiritualism, seances, and a fascination with death and the afterlife. People were often desperate to connect with lost loved ones, and grief could drive them to unusual extremes. Historians delved into regional archives, looking for any mention of strange mourning rituals, forgotten superstitions, or isolated communities that might have held unusual customs regarding death and remembrance. There were tales of spirit photography, where ghostly images were supposedly captured alongside the living, and accounts of mediums who claimed to channel the dead. While none of these directly pointed to artificial babies, they painted a picture of a society grappling with mortality in ways that, to modern eyes, seemed deeply strange. The possibility of a darker, more macabre explanation, rooted in obscure local history or a particularly insular community, began to take shape. Perhaps this wasn't just one family's isolated act of grief, but a practice, however rare, that was understood within a certain cultural context. The thought was chilling. What other forgotten horrors might be lurking in the dusty corners of history? Another avenue of inquiry led to the photographer who captured the image. Was this an isolated incident for them, or did they specialize in such strange portraits? A photographer's ledger, or business records if they could be found, might reveal other clients with similar requests. Researchers scoured old city directories and professional listings, looking for studios operating in 1894 in the general geographical area where the photograph was believed to have originated. They investigated any known eccentricities or a dark reputation associated with photographers from that period. Some photographers were known for their macabre sensibilities, dabbling in staged scenes or using elaborate props. Could this photographer have been one such individual, perhaps even suggesting the idea of the artificial baby to a grieving family? The idea that a professional might facilitate such an illusion was almost as disturbing as the family's choice to participate. It suggested a market, however small, for these kinds of deeply unsettling mementos. The climate of the time itself provided a crucial backdrop for understanding how such a photograph could even exist. The year 1894 was part of an era defined by high infant mortality rates. Diseases like diphtheria, scarlet fever, and tuberculosis swept through communities, often claiming children before they reached adulthood. Grief was a constant companion for many families. This pervasive sorrow, combined with the rising popularity of photography, created a unique cultural landscape. Spiritualism offered solace to many, promising continued connection with the deceased. The Victorian fascination with death, often expressed through elaborate mourning rituals and symbols, meant that death was not hidden away but was very much a part of daily life. In this context, the photograph, while still deeply disturbing, began to make a twisted kind of sense. It spoke to a desperation, a profound human need to hold on to what was lost, even if it meant creating an elaborate, unsettling illusion. The photograph became a chilling artifact of a time when the boundaries between life and death, reality and illusion, were constantly being tested by the relentless tide of human sorrow. It was a stark reminder that the past, despite its sepia-toned charm, often contained depths of despair and coping mechanisms that continue to haunt us today. The more they dug into the historical context, the less like an isolated anomaly the photograph seemed, and the more it felt like a dark, desperate echo of a widespread human struggle. The deeper analysis of the photograph began to confirm the chilling suspicions. Experts, some with backgrounds in forensic imaging and historical artifacts, were brought in to examine the image with a precision previously impossible. Digital enhancement allowed for an unprecedented level of detail, zooming in on the baby's features with microscopic clarity. The findings were conclusive and profoundly unsettling. The baby in the photograph was not a living child. It was an elaborate, highly realistic dummy. This wasn't just a simple doll with crude features. The craftsmanship was remarkable, almost disturbingly so. The skin tone, initially mistaken for the pale complexion of an infant in a time before widespread artificial lighting for photography, was revealed to be a carefully painted surface. There was a subtle sheen, a uniformity that no living skin could possess. The texture, when magnified, showed faint brushstrokes or molding marks, betraying its artificial origin. The lack of natural infant movement, which had been a nagging feeling from the first glance, was now confirmed. There were no subtle creases of skin from squirming, no slight tension in the limbs that a real baby would exhibit, even when sleeping or held still. The peculiar posture, unnaturally stiff, was not the result of careful posing of a fragile infant, but the inherent rigidity of its construction. Further investigation into the construction of this dummy suggested a high level of skill and dedication. It wasn't mass-produced. This was likely a custom piece. The materials would have been expensive for the time. Porcelain or wax for the head and hands, carefully painted to mimic flesh, perhaps a cloth body filled with sawdust or cotton to give it some weight and form. Some experts speculated about internal mechanisms, though these couldn't be confirmed from a two-dimensional photograph. Could there have been rudimentary joints, allowing for some posing? Or was it simply a static figure, meticulously crafted to deceive the eye? The skill involved in its creation was undeniable, disturbing in its precision. Someone had spent a considerable amount of time and effort to make this replica as lifelike as possible. The revelation of the dummy's true nature immediately led to the most pressing question. Why? What compelled a family to commission or create such an object and then photograph it as if it were a living child? Several plausible, yet equally disturbing reasons emerged. The most immediate and heartbreaking theory was that the dummy served as a replacement for a lost child. In an era of high infant mortality, the grief of parents was immense and often prolonged. Perhaps a child had died, and the parents, unable to cope with the loss, sought to fill the void with a physical representation of their deceased baby. The dummy became a tangible manifestation of their enduring love, a way to keep the memory alive, however morbidly. It was a coping mechanism, but one that had veered into deeply unsettling territory. Another possibility was a macabre artistic endeavor. While less likely given the intimate setting of the photograph, some individuals in the Victorian era were fascinated with death and artificiality. Could this have been an extreme expression of that fascination, a morbid curiosity brought to life? Though this seemed less probable for a family portrait, the sheer artistry involved in the dummy's creation could suggest a darker, more experimental motive. However, the most chilling implication was that of a psychological coping mechanism gone awry. The constant presence of death, the fragility of life, and the absence of modern therapeutic understanding meant that families often grappled with grief in isolation. The dummy could have been a desperate attempt to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to pretend that the tragedy had never occurred, or to simply have something to hold, to nurture, even if it was lifeless. The thought of a family interacting with this lifeless replica as if it were real, speaking to it, dressing it, perhaps even rocking it, sent shivers down the spine. It painted a picture of immense psychological torment and a profound break from reality. The dummy was not just an object, it was a symbol of their unbearable sorrow, a silent witness to their descent into a world where illusion became their only comfort. The act of taking the photograph itself, once viewed as a simple family portrait, now seemed like a ritualistic performance. It wasn't just about documenting a moment, it was about solidifying an illusion. It was an attempt to create a perfect family image, a visual lie to the world, and perhaps even to themselves. The parents, with their stiff postures and distant gazes, were not merely posing for a camera. They were performing a role, participating in a solemn, deeply personal charade. The photograph became a frozen moment of their delusion, a testament to their profound sorrow and their desperate need to control a reality that had become unbearable. It was a public declaration of a private grief, twisted into something almost unrecognizable. The image was no longer just a historical curiosity. It was a window into a family's fractured psyche, a chilling reminder of the extreme lengths to which human beings might go when confronted with unimaginable loss. The construction of this nightmare was not just physical, it was deeply emotional and psychological, leaving an indelible mark on anyone who dared to look closely. The family's eyes, once observed as merely stiff or distant, now held a far more tragic and complex meaning. There was a desperate sadness in the mother's gaze, a quiet plea that seemed to transcend the century that separated her from the viewer. Her lips were pressed together, not in a smile, but in what looked like an effort to hold back a lifetime of tears. It wasn't the vacant stare of someone posing reluctantly. It was the haunted look of a person living through an ongoing nightmare. Her eyes, shadowed and perhaps a little red-rimmed, spoke of sleepless nights and a grief so profound it had warped her reality. It was clear now that she wasn't just a participant in this macabre charade. She was its architect, driven by a love so fierce it had become something else entirely. The father, too, carried a similar, though slightly different burden in his expression. His jaw was set, his brow furrowed, a grim determination etched into his features. He wasn't just supporting his wife. He was actively upholding the illusion, perhaps out of his own deep sorrow, or perhaps out of a need to protect her fragile state of mind. His eyes, though less openly sorrowful than the mother's, held a weariness that spoke volumes. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much, endured too much, and was now trapped in a reality of his own making. The unsettling realization that they knew the baby wasn't real, yet participated in the illusion, was truly chilling. It wasn't ignorance, it was a conscious, painful choice, a shared delusion that bound them together in their grief. This wasn't a family unaware of their strange act. They were deeply, tragically aware, and their eyes were the windows to that painful truth. Then there were the baby's eyes. Even in the faded sepia print, they were the most unsettling feature. They were not the soft, bright eyes of an infant, full of curiosity and life. Instead, they were glossy, fixed, and utterly vacant. There was no depth, no reflection, no spark of anything living. They stared straight ahead, unblinking, into nothingness. It was a stare that betrayed its lifelessness, yet seemed to hold a silent accusation. It was the gaze of an object, perfectly crafted, but devoid of a soul. The psychological effect of these unblinking eyes on the viewer was profound. They didn't just look at you, they seemed to look through you, to the very core of your being, challenging your understanding of life and death, reality and illusion. They were the eyes of the uncanny valley personified, almost human, but just enough off to trigger a deep, primal sense of unease. The photograph, even after all these years, continued to exert a chilling influence on those who viewed it. It wasn't merely a historical artifact, it was a psychological trap, the feeling of being watched, judged, or drawn into the family's delusion was palpable. It felt as though, by looking at the image, one was becoming complicit in their sorrow, a silent witness to their deeply personal tragedy. The image seemed to transcend its historical context, reaching across the decades to evoke primal fears about loss, sanity, and the boundaries of human grief. It wasn't just a picture, it was an experience, a journey into a family's darkest moment. The photograph, in its silent, faded glory, told an unspoken narrative. It was a story of loss so immense it shattered reality, an attempt to defy death itself, and a chilling glimpse into the dark corners of human grief. The true horror wasn't just the dummy itself or the technical skill involved in its creation. The horror lay in the psychological implications for the family, and by extension, for the viewer. It was the horror of seeing love twisted into something unrecognizable, of sanity giving way to delusion, and of a desperate yearning that manifested in a deeply unsettling way. The image spoke of a time when death was a constant companion, when grief was a heavy, often isolating burden, and when people resorted to extraordinary, often disturbing measures to cope with the unbearable. It reminded us that the human heart, when broken, can lead us down paths we never thought possible. This photograph was more than just a picture of a family. It was a testament to the enduring, and sometimes terrifying, power of human emotion. The unsettling photograph, with its fixed gazes and the dummy's vacant stare, made one wonder if there were other stories like it from that time. Were there similar historical cases of such macabre practices? Delving into archives and historical accounts, researchers found that while post-mortem photography was common and mourning rituals could be elaborate, the specific act of portraying a highly realistic dummy as a living child in a family portrait was remarkably rare. There were mentions of mourning dolls or grief dolls in some cultures, often simple effigies used to comfort grieving parents, but these were typically not crafted with such disturbing realism for a formal portrait. They were more symbolic, less an attempt to fool the eye. This particular photograph stood out because of its extreme realism and the family's clear intention to present the dummy as an actual, living child, rather than a symbolic representation of a lost one. It wasn't just a doll, it was an imitation of life, designed to deceive, or perhaps to help the family deceive themselves. The search for similar cases only highlighted the uniqueness and the unsettling nature of this specific image. It wasn't part of a widespread trend. It seemed to be an isolated, deeply personal, and profoundly disturbing act. This made the family's story even more compelling and tragic, suggesting a level of grief and psychological coping that pushed the boundaries of what was considered normal, even in an era accustomed to death. It wasn't just a historical curiosity, it was an anomaly, a singular testament to an extreme human experience. Naturally, the next question was about the family itself. What became of them? Did they ever recover from their profound grief? Did the dummy remain a part of their lives, a silent, unmoving member of the household? Tracing their lineage forward or backward in time proved incredibly difficult. The records from that era were often sparse, and families could disappear from public record with surprising ease, especially if they wished to. There were no clear indications of their future, no obituaries that mentioned a strange, lifelike doll, no census records that listed an artificial child. It was as if they, or at least this particular chapter of their lives, had been deliberately erased or simply faded into obscurity. The lack of information only deepened the mystery and fueled speculation. One could only imagine the possible scenarios. Perhaps the family eventually found peace, slowly letting go of their uncanny creation as time healed some of their wounds. Or perhaps the dummy remained, a constant, chilling presence, a reminder of their loss and their desperate attempt to defy it. It was easy to picture a tragic end for them, a life forever haunted by their creation, by the unspoken secret that sat silently in their family portrait. The thought that the dummy might have stayed with them, occupying a place at the dinner table or in a crib, was a truly unsettling one, painting a picture of a family locked in a perpetual state of delusion. Then there was the question of the object itself. What happened to the dummy after the photograph was taken? Was it carefully preserved, a cherished, if morbid possession? Was it eventually destroyed, perhaps in a moment of clarity or a desperate attempt to break free from its psychological hold? Or was it passed down through generations, a strange, secret heirloom, its true nature hidden from subsequent family members? The idea of the object carrying a lingering, malevolent energy, a silent witness to a family's deepest sorrow and delusion, was a powerful one. It was hard to imagine such an object simply being discarded like any other toy. It held too much emotional weight, too much of the family's shattered hopes and dreams. The photograph, in its stark and unsettling presence, served as a powerful warning. It was a cautionary tale, not just about the dangers of unchecked grief, but about the blurring of lines between reality and illusion. It was a stark reminder of the psychological fragility of the human mind when confronted with profound loss, when the unbearable pain compels individuals to seek comfort in the most unconventional and ultimately disturbing ways. The image became a testament to the fact that sometimes the human heart, in its desperate attempt to cope with the unimaginable, can create its own deeply unsettling realities. It showed how far people might go to keep a memory alive, even if that memory was a chilling, artificial substitute for what was truly lost. The photograph didn't just document a moment, it documented a descent, a struggle, and a profound, unsettling truth about the human condition. It whispered across the decades that grief, when left untended or when it consumes completely, can lead to paths that twist and distort life in ways that are both horrifying and deeply sad. The why behind the family's actions remained the most haunting question, even more so than the true nature of the baby itself. We had explored the historical context, the high infant mortality rates, the pervasive grief of the era, but even with that understanding, the creation and public display of such a lifelike dummy posed as a living child in a family portrait pushed the boundaries of conventional mourning. Was it pure denial, a desperate clinging to the memory of a lost child so intense that it manifested in this physical, artificial form? It was easy to imagine a mother, perhaps, unwilling to accept the finality of death, finding solace in the tangible presence of a replica, however chilling. This wasn't just a locket of hair or a post-mortem photograph of a deceased loved one. This was an active, ongoing illusion. Or was it a deeper descent into delusion, a psychological break where the lines between the real and the imagined became so blurred that the dummy truly was their child in their minds? The chilling realization was that their actions, while undeniably born of immense grief and sorrow, crossed a line into the truly disturbing. It wasn't just eccentric or unusual, it was profoundly unsettling, hinting at a level of psychological distress that is hard for us to fully grasp today. The quiet horror of it lies in the intimate nature of the deception, the way they presented this artificial being as a cherished family member, inviting the world to witness their fabricated joy. As viewers, we are compelled to consider our own reactions to this photograph. The discomfort it evokes is palpable, a visceral response to something that looks almost human but isn't. Why do certain images resonate with our deepest fears? The uncanny valley effect, where something is nearly human but not quite, triggers an innate sense of alarm in us. This photograph taps directly into that primal fear. It touches upon our universal human fear of loss, of the unknown, and perhaps most profoundly, the fear of seeing sanity unravel. We look at the parents' faces, and we project our own anxieties about grief, about what it could drive us to do, or what it could turn us into. The photograph forces us to confront the fragility of the human mind under extreme duress. The photograph itself, despite being a static image from over a century ago, seems to possess a life of its own. It's not just a piece of paper, it's a living artifact, constantly provoking discussion, fear, and philosophical questions decades later. Its ability to capture and hold our attention, to make us dissect every detail, and speculate about the lives behind the frame is remarkable. It's a testament to the power of images, especially those that contain a hidden, unsettling truth. The enduring mystery of the family and their silent, artificial child continues to draw us in, making us wonder about the untold stories, the quiet despair that must have filled their home. The photograph becomes a portal, a window not just into a past era, but into the darker, more unsettling aspects of human psychology. And even after all this analysis, all the speculation and historical context, lingering questions remain. We may never fully answer them, and perhaps that's part of its enduring power. We don't know the dummy's exact materials or the specific circumstances that led to its creation. We don't know if the family ever found peace or if their lives remained shadowed by this elaborate illusion. The power of the unknown, the unanswered questions, fuels our fascination and dread. The photograph, in its stark simplicity, serves as a powerful reminder that history is not just a collection of facts, but a tapestry woven with human emotions, some of which are profoundly dark and disturbing. It's a portal to a past that, while distant, still manages to touch us with its unsettling truth. It reminds us that grief can be a force so powerful it reshapes reality, not just for those experiencing it, but for anyone who encounters its lingering echoes, like this silent, artificial child. The image forces us to contend with the idea that our ancestors, living in a world so different from ours, grappled with pains that were fundamentally the same, sometimes leading to responses that defy our modern understanding. It's a testament to the enduring human capacity for both profound sorrow and bewildering invention in the face of it. This photograph, initially appearing as nothing more than a faded relic from 1894, ultimately transforms into something far more profound and disturbing. It morphs from a simple historical artifact into a chilling testament to the extremes of human despair and the uncanny lengths to which grief can push people. What began as an ordinary family portrait, a quiet glimpse into a bygone era, slowly unravels to reveal a hidden layer of unsettling artificiality, forcing us to confront a reality that is both tragic and deeply unsettling. The initial innocent curiosity it sparked quickly gives way to a profound sense of unease, a feeling that lingers long after the details of the dummy baby are fully understood. It becomes a silent scream from the past, echoing the pain of a family caught in a web of their own making. The lasting impression this image leaves on anyone who views it is undeniable. It's not just a picture, it's an experience that challenges our perceptions of reality, grief, and the very boundaries of sanity. The unnerving stillness of the scene, the haunting expressions of the parents, and the vacant stare of the artificial child combine to create a tableau that is difficult to shake. It forces us to question what we see, to look beyond the surface, and to consider the hidden narratives that often lie beneath seemingly mundane historical records. The photograph becomes an unforgettable symbol of a time when the lines between life and death, reality and illusion, were perhaps more blurred, or at least more desperately manipulated than we might comfortably imagine. The feeling of unease that persists long after the viewing is a testament to its power, a quiet whisper that some sorrows run so deep they can distort the very fabric of existence. The family and their artificial child remain frozen in time, their silent story echoing through the centuries. They are a monument to a forgotten tragedy, a disturbing secret unearthed from the depths of history. The photograph captures not just a moment, but a profound human struggle, a desperate attempt to defy the finality of death. It stands as a stark reminder that the past is not always neat and tidy, filled with predictable narratives. Instead, it can harbor dark corners, unsettling truths, and human experiences that challenge our modern sensibilities. The unsettling realization surfaces that such dark corners of human experience might still exist, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the right moment or the right observer to bring them to light. This image, in its quiet despair, reveals that the passage of time does not diminish the intensity of human emotion, nor does it erase the strange ways in which people have coped with unbearable loss. Ultimately, this chilling photograph compels us to reflect on the nature of horror itself. The horror it presents isn't supernatural in the traditional sense. There are no ghosts or monsters lurking in the shadows. Instead, the horror is deeply human. It stems from the profound loss, the psychological torment, and the desperate, almost unimaginable lengths to which grief can drive us. It's the horror of seeing a family so broken by sorrow that they create an elaborate, lifeless replica, trying to fill an unfillable void. This photograph serves as a chilling reminder that the past often holds secrets more disturbing than fiction, not because of fantastical elements, but because they reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of human suffering and the sometimes unsettling paths people take to navigate it. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that the greatest horrors often reside not in the supernatural, but within the depths of the human heart, twisted by unbearable pain and loss. It's a testament to the enduring power of an image to transcend time and speak to our most fundamental fears, leaving us with a lingering sense of awe and dread at the sheer complexity of the human experience. The silent plea in the parent's eyes, the eerie stillness of the dummy, all combine to create a narrative that is both profoundly sad and deeply inherently unsettling. This photograph forever marks itself in our minds, a stark emblem of a sorrow so immense it warped reality.